just to recap on the last couple months and the House bills that have changed for those who have not been involved in the previous kind of iterations we've been talking about. So House Bill 1110 and 1337, both of them different things, both add more density to your lots. 77 different cities within the state of Washington have increased their density. Your density is increased based off your population, and that puts you in a different tier, which gives you a certain number of units that you can now add to your single family lot. And that's based off of your location and proximity to frequent transit. So for example, if you're in like a tier 1 city, you can go up to six units. Some cities have gone over and above that based off of your location of frequent transit. Redmond allows 8, Bellevue, I think a max of 9, kind of depends. There's affordable housing fees in there too, so you just kind of have to look at it. Every city is different. Katie, I don't know what I'm doing here. Okay, there we go. All right, so House Bill 1110, specifically more like multifamily related, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, fiveplex, sixplexes. That's basic 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They all look like townhomes, but we should just call them townhomes. Courtyard apartments, townhouses, stacked flats, cottages. And then House Bill 1337 is for ADUs. If you don't know what an ADU is, it's for accessory dwelling unit, or DADU is detached accessory dwelling unit. Previously, some of the cities around here would allow for you to have a ADU on your property, but they didn't allow you to segregate and sell them separately. Now you can, and you can do a combo of many things. You can either have 2 attached, you can have 2 detached, you can have 1 attached, 1 detached. So yeah, there's a lot of different options there. I'm going to continue to roll this through every month, but if you look at the complications that come along with development, the state focused specifically on zoning, which is the very tip of the iceberg. And then we've got all this other stuff down below, which affects how you can develop a property. This was from last month. We're probably going to roll this over because as you're looking at development and starting projects, you have to understand how you use capital, and maybe you can use some of your equity you have within your property, or if you've got capital partners, or how your lender is going to look at it. There's specific metrics in which a lender is going to look at how the project is going to perform and whether they're going to give you a loan or not. So that was last month. If you guys want to look at that in a little bit more detail, we are recording these. We're putting them on YouTube, and you guys can pull that up too, because I think people are just still asking lots of questions. Yeah, here you go. Previous sessions, if you want to look it up, they're on YouTube. Check them out. Okay. Oh, I guess this presentation is for informational purposes only. It is complicated. Don't take what I tell you and go do something without telling me or anyone else. Make sure you do your homework. Okay. We're going to be talking about permitting and zoning, hurdles, timelines, what to avoid, things to look for. I think that the main takeaway here is where to look and what to look for as a very high level. And I'm not going to get into the boring details of every different city, but if you have a piece of property and you're wanting to understand what you could do, obviously you could reach out to an architect, you could reach out to us, maybe a civil engineer. A lot of people are telling us they just went to the city and the city told them they could do something. I had a gal call me 2 days ago, and she's got a really nice piece of property in Bellevue, and the city said that she could put six units on her property, but didn't tell them about how there's a private access drive that she uses to access her property, which she has to get agreements from all of her other neighbors to be able to actually put those units on her lot. But she was really excited. She called me 3 times in a row, and she was like, "I'm ready to go." And I'm like, let's hold tight. So you can talk to the city and they'll give you some information, but just know they're not going to give you it all. And I know we have some city officials on here too, so I say that with all the love in the world. Yeah, I guess it's kind of funny as people have been continuing to join in, and we're looking at the attendance list. We've got architects, we've got civil engineers, we got builders, we've got capital people, we've got people that all have property, we've got brokers, we've got escrow. It's just a really big audience of different types of people with different industry backgrounds and whatnot. And I think that some of the previous conversations I've been a part of have been specifically focused to the city staff or to the brokers, but then you have all the other people that have questions, and it's that's part of the reason for this. Okay, so zoning, what is it? It just basically tells you how you can use your property, how many units you can put, what the FAR is. If you don't know what FAR is, it's floor area ratio. Some people have floor area ratio. Some people just have lot coverage requirements, which means that if you think about it like a wedding cake or a box, you have a square piece of property and you have to set back a certain number of feet. And then within that, you can do whatever you want as long as you're within the impervious surface calculations of 50 feet, 50%, 65%, whatever it is. And we'll kind of show you where to look at that. Permitting is obviously the process of getting approval to be able to develop your property, build a home. So the zoning and permitting work hand in hand, meaning that obviously you should research your zoning to see how many units you can put, what the calculations are for impervious surface and your setbacks, to be able to then put together a submittal packet, which will include your demo permit, your building permits, any LDAs or LSMs, which would be like a civil permit. Sometimes the city doesn't have the utilities within the city. They have them within a separate district, and you got to get permits and plans from that utility district to be combined and submit together with the city, and then also the utility district. And you got to get approvals from everyone. So like, for example, on one project, if you're building multiple units, you may have like 7 or 8 permits, one for each home, one for the civil, one for the utilities, one for the demo. That gets you pretty close to 7 or 8, depending on how many units you got. Different jurisdictions do things differently. As much as I would really like to be able to have the city, the state say, no, it has to all be this way. Everyone wants to feel special and they all want to do things differently. So the city of Bellevue, the city of Seattle, Kirkland, Redmond, Bothell, Kenmore, everyone has done things completely different. So if you think that you're going to figure out today something that you can do in Bellevue and translate that over to Kenmore, you're wrong. Because it's a different city, different tier, different requirements, all the code is different. And also, let's not forget about the interpretations of the staff that are looking at the code that think it means something different than what it may mean to somebody else who's looking at the code. So just a lot of nuance. Okay, so prior to the state mandate of, so House Bill 1110 to 1337, when they were signed into law, basically, July of 2023, but didn't get implemented until July of 2025. They had 2 years to implement it. But prior to the state saying they have to do that across the state with House Bill 1110 and 1337, Seattle and Kirkland were more like early adopters. So you could add ADUs and DADUs and cottages and things like that. So I'm just pulling up their code as an example. And I was speaking earlier to someone here that I was telling him that Kirkland said that when the mandates came through, that ever since all these cities had to update to the state requirements of 1337 and 1110, City of Kirkland said, well, we're pretty compliant, so we're not really going to update anything. They made a couple little tweaks, but other than that, they were good. However, they did like a phased approach. So phase 1 was, let's just finish the bare minimum to be able to be compliant per the state. And then after that, they're going to add a little bit more. So they have a phase 2 coming up, particularly, which means they're going to start looking at their code again in February to maybe relieve some setbacks, add some height, impervious surface. They're kind of looking at some other stuff, and they're also in the same time going to be consolidating zoning types. So, you know, one thing we didn't put in here was a zoning map, which I thought would have been really good. I just thought about that. But you can see here, like, this is the different zoning types. You got RS, RSX, RSA, WD2, PLA, PLA. That's like a very scratch of the surface type of zoning. But if you look at a zoning map and all the different zonings that Kirkland has, they basically said it's really complicated and it's too many, and each one has a different little nuance to what you can and can't do. So they're going to actually pare it down. So like Seattle came out with neighborhood residential NR, and then so did Redmond. They're taking all of these different zoning types, which have all these different unique things, which makes that code so complicated in 550 pages, and they're trying to pare it down because it's complicated for the city staff to be able to review and understand the nuances between them, especially as they have turnover. But then also it's really hard for the builders to be able to understand like the nuances between them, and sometimes they conflict with each other. And then at the same time, like you have the non-professionals that have a home they want to remodel, or maybe they want to build a dadu in the backyard, and they don't understand because it's so complicated. So they're trying to pare it down. That's what Kirkland is doing their phase 2 for, but a lot of these others, as they're doing the state mandate, they already pared it down. But what this is called is like a zoning table. This is basically saying what's permitted and what's not, for example. And I think that what we have in here specifically is like, if you look at a zoning map or you look on your public records and you see what zone you have, if it's RS, this tells you what's permitted or not permitted. So you can see up here at the top, NP is not permitted, P would be permitted. So for example, if you're like, I want to build multiple units, or I want to build, maybe you said you want to put a daycare facility, or you want to put some golf course on your property, it's going to say you can or cannot do that based off your zoning type. So for most of the purposes of this conversation, we're talking about how many units, what does that mean? So in this specific instance, RS and RSX says that you can put detached dwelling units. And when you see something that doesn't have a P or an NP on here, these are going to be little hyperlinks, which will go to a footnote of this table, 22 and 23, which will tell you more specifically what types of detached dwelling units you can go to, or it'll reference to a secondary code, which says you can put 4, you can put 6, you can do whatever. So that's, if you're looking at the zoning code, you go to Kirkland zoning code, find the table, look at your zoning type, how many dwelling units can you put there, what's permitted, what's not. If we're following the same thing here, this tells you about, and specifically low density residential. Let's see if this works. It doesn't work. For low density residential, this is basically saying here, like if we use RS or RSX again, that's for a church. We're going to go attached, detached dwelling units. Okay, I want to put detached dwelling units on my lot that's zoned RS. Okay, so then that means I have to have a 20-foot front setback. I need a side yard setback of 5 foot, and then it says /15. And you're like, what does that mean? 15 feet. Okay, so then if you click on this hyperlink number 9, I know what that means. It's basically saying you have 7.5 feet on both sides, or a combo of the two to make 15. So you got 5 on one side, you got 10 on the other, but it has to be a total of 15, or 7.5, 7.5. So that's what that means. Your rear setback's got to be 10 feet, and then your maximum lot coverage is 50 feet. So if you take a 10,000 square foot lot, you divide it by 2 or times 0.5, you get 5,000 square feet of impervious surface. There's some other kind of nuances in here about how you can add more if you get like credits for pavers versus concrete and other things like that. But this is kind of how you would start to conceptualize what you can do on your piece of property. All right, the primary purpose of permitting is so that way we build houses that stick around for a long time, basically. How many permits does the project take? Well, we kind of talked about that. About 7, 8, kind of depends. These are some of the ones in Kirkland specifically. So you got your LSM, which is your civil permit, your demo permit. If you got 5 buildings, you got 5 more building permits. North Shore Utility District, in this particular project that I know this one's from, you have one for your sewer district, and then you had a separate water district, which was Woodinville Water. So that's 1, 2, 5, so that's 7, 8, 9. 9 permits on one project, a 1 5-unit project. So it's a lot to manage. All right, this is talking about ADUs and DADUs. Let's see, how should I explain this? So for when you're submitting a building permit application to the city, again, this is kind of how I think about it. Okay, let's say I'm going to go buy a piece of property. You get through feasibility, however long that takes, however many units you're going to put on it. And okay, you waive feasibility. You've done your survey, you got no encroachments, you got your survey, you got your trees on there, you got your units laid out, everything looks good, you submitted to the city. In some cases, you would do a pre-application meeting or a pre-submittal meeting, which is basically you going to the city with a set of documents like your arborist report, your title report, your survey, maybe some preliminary civil drawings, and you're saying, hey, city, this is what I want to do. And they're going to tell you if it's acceptable or if it's not, or whatever key considerations you may want to factor into your design before you submit. It's pre-submittal. And so then you take that information, you go to your architect and your civil and your geotech, and you do all of your calculations, and you go back to your arborist and you say, okay, this is what we have to do. And you take that information and you combine all of it together to be able to then submit to the city for your first round of review. Depending on the type of project you're submitting, whether it be under the House Bill 1110 bucket or the 1337 bucket, it may be different on how you're going to submit that application, because these cities look at House Bill 1110 as multifamily, although the code per what the state put out says it's supposed to be considered single family. So like Kirkland and Seattle have had a lot of experience with looking at these multi-unit submittal type projects because they've been doing it for a while. Now Bellevue, Bothell, Kenmore, like all these other places have to be able to receive an application that they've never received before, meaning that before it was like, I have a multifamily permit, which is a high rise or it's 5/1 with, PT deck and you got retail below or parking or whatever, or a single family home or a plat. That's kind of like what they had before. They didn't have this like, well, I've got 4 units on this lot, so it's not single family because it's not single family, but it's also not an apartment building. So how do we look at it? Well, it's over a single unit, so we're going to put it into the apartment building workflow, which means it's going to take 2 years even to get approval on your permits. But that seems kind of excessive, doesn't it? So they're like kind of working through different workflows, and they're looking to jurisdictions that have looked at this in the past, like Kirkland and Seattle, and saying, hey, how did you guys work through this process, right? And at the same time, Master Builders Association and all the builders are providing like a lot of pressure and saying, hey, I need my permit. Time is money. I got interest on me. Hurry up, and like rightfully so. So anyways, what I'm saying is like when you submit your application, it's going to be different based off how it falls under their code. And I would expect a little bit of lag time as cities get caught up to speed with how to review these things. Okay. Yeah, so developing anywhere. I think this is not specifically for Kirkland, but anywhere. You're going to have a lot of different types of reviews. So when you submit something, after you've gone through your full design packet, that will probably take you, after you waive feasibility, till you make your first submittal, anywhere from like 90 to 100 days, if you're good and you're quick. Then once you put it into the city, there's going to be a lot of different reviews. You've got Public Works who's going to review it. You've got Fire that's going to review it. You've got your planning staff that's going to review it. You've got, basically everyone. Just think about like all the garbage trucks and the Amazon trucks and how you're going to turn around in there and how you're going to be able to get fire in there. And if you got a fire truck, how are you going to get there? Because you have to have a hose. It's 150 feet long. And can you make it all the way around that building to be able to get that fire? Anyways, and then you got your city arborist that's looking at it and they want to save all the trees. So that's a big one. But that's kind of what you have to look out for while you're looking at all these different cities when you submit. All right, so this is kind of a little bit about what Public Works is looking at. Civil drawings, stormwater, right-of-way improvements, meaning improve the city's property. Erosion and sediment control. I think that's probably going to be even more strict as we look at all of the different floodings that's happening right now, right? Like, where's all the stormwater going? I don't know. I think this wasn't like 100-year water rainfall, but it was like, I don't know, was it like 50-year rainfall? I don't know. It's a lot of water. And so they're going to want to make sure that, less houses are starting to float down rivers. Sewer availability. This is a big one. So if you remember the iceberg, we talked about zoning, right? I'll go back real quick. It's a lot of slides. Okay, so zoning, right? We only talked about zoning. We only talked about looking at how many units you can put on your lot. That's what the city focused on. Now you've submitted your application. Here's a good example. City of Seattle will allow up to 8 units on 1 6-inch side sewer. And, but if you submit to Redmond, they only allow for 4. So if you got a 6-unit deal and you're submitting in the city of Redmond, you have to run 2 sewer lines. But I mean, like, what's the difference between what's going in the pipe and where it's at? It's kind of the same, but it's different depending on the city. So that's Public Works. Everybody's going to have a little bit of a different review process, right? So what we're talking about here are all the different requirements and things that like a city is going to look at for Public Works specifically. But a lot of them haven't looked at, okay, well, we've got, I don't know what the number is. Let's just say Bellevue now is going to have, let's just do some easy math, 100 projects that are all middle housing related, and they all have 4 units. Okay, we got 400 units, all in like the suburban area of Bellevue, and they all need water. They all need to make sure they got sprinklers, maybe, and they all got sewer. And so like, where's it all going to go, right? So like this trickle down effect, I think, is probably going to start taking effect, where this is not what's really been forethought, I think. It's like, okay, we've passed House Bill 1110 in 1337, and that means that we can add a certain number of units. But what about all the infrastructure that it comes along with that? So this is, I think, going to become a lot more stringent as we start looking at how things evolve over time and planning accordingly. But anyways, this is just a lot of what they look at. Yeah, this is more. This is just a quick example of a site that we worked on, all the different types of, so you got, what was this? This is 5 units, I think. Yeah, this is 5 units. So you got 5 different water meters here. That was Woodinville Water District. You've got a sewer manhole that was put in the public right-of-way. You then have to improve this public right-of-way here. That sewer manhole is going to provide sewer all the way up in here. It's probably hard for you to see that are not online, but then you've got all these different sewer connections that are coming in from all the units. There's just a lot going on in these tight areas, and you have to have proper slopes. You got to make sure you got certain setbacks. You can't really have your water and your power in the same trench. So you got to have, separate trenches, or you have to be separated a certain amount. So on these tight infill sites, there's a lot of considerations for how you're going to be designing the site, making sure everything's flowing properly. Because the last thing you want is to build something and then have problems with it. We talked about this a little bit, but as you're designing and looking at, your property, and you're looking at, okay, let's go back to the zoning map, and you're saying, I have this big a lot, okay? This is, I don't know, let's call it 3/4 of an acre or something like that. And then you just use look at your impervious surface calculations, 50%. Well, technically your lot is this big. And if you run your impervious surface calculations, then it would be based off of your lot size. But what they don't tell you is that because your lot goes halfway across this public right-of-way right here, the city is going to take that away. So you have to, this is what's called a street dedication. You're going to have to dedicate this portion of your property to the city, and then you have to upgrade it. So there's a sidewalk here, which you're going to have to put in, and that's going to run all the way around. And so your calculations of impervious surface or FAR or any of that kind of stuff would actually be taken off of the reduced lot size, not the full lot size, but what it will be after you reduce this right here. And so where we see a lot of confusion with some people is like, hey, I bought this really big lot and it's a great deal, but in reality, you're giving away 7,500 feet. And so it's really not as good of a deal as you think. So just make sure you're looking at that kind of stuff and how that affects your FAR, your lot coverage, your setbacks, because this will be your new property line. And then you probably have to do another 10-foot setback from there, or 5 or 20 or whatever it is. Something to think about. This is just an example of a project that we did that just kind of shows the level of infrastructure improvement that you got to put in. So this is what it was before. You can see there's no curb, gutter, sidewalk, just typical house in a suburban neighborhood you would see. And then, obviously now you got a sidewalk and you got your water meters here. You got a landscape strip, you got street trees. Like, it looks way better, but there's just a lot of cost that goes involved with that. And based on the type of project you're submitting to the city or the county or whatever, if you're under 1337 or House Bill 1110, they may or may not require you to put in all that infrastructure. It just depends. So however you submit your application is going to trigger different things, which is why it's really important to understand from the get-go how you're going to submit. Because if you're like, I only want to put 3 units on there, like, what type of 3 units? Because if it's going to be under 1337, you may not have to do this, like if it's in Bellevue particularly. If it's House Bill 1110, you're putting 6, you probably will. Just depends on how you do it. And then if you say you want a unit-lot subdivision process, then you definitely do. But if you do a condo, then you don't. Just really depends. But it adds a lot of cost depending on how you do it. All right, so that's kind of what we talked about. I've been using this example for a while. This is a good one. This is not the same lot as the gal that called me 3 different times a couple days ago, but same kind of concept. Again, you go and talk to the city. This is like almost the exact same scenario. This lady, different lot, talked to the city and said, hey, Bellevue said I can put in 6 homes. And you're like, that's great. But they didn't tell you that this is a private driveway and that everyone that is using this private driveway to access their property has a stake or a right in that private drive and has to give you approval to be able to bring the water and power and sewer to your property, which is going to service and benefit you because you're chewing up this road, which they use for access, but you bought the lot already. So what do? Start running around talking to all the neighbors. Hey, can I chew this up? Can you sign here? And then they go, what's in it for me? And they start putting their hand out. And then that's where it gets fun. Okay, just more public right-of-way, dedication stuff, things to look out for. Affordable housing fees, my favorite. This is Seattle. Like for people who do business in Seattle, this is very easy to figure out. It has not been very easy in some other jurisdictions. So I use this because it's easier. But this is City of Seattle. If you're not from Seattle, I'm sure most of you are or know it. But anyways, this is their GIS map. You can click on the little button up here that says mandatory housing affordability areas. And their fees are structured based off of if they're in high, medium, or low areas or downtown. And so what that means is like your fee goes up or down based off of what color you are. So I just picked a random lot. If this is your lot, I'm not looking to buy your lot, just so you know. But for example, this is zone LR1M. Okay. If you know what M is, it's mandatory. Don't like it, tough. Okay, so if we go back here, right? This is in the medium area, LR1. It's all going to start flowing. So it's zones with an M in medium areas for the time frame between March 1st, 2025 to February 28th, 2026. You got to pay $19.51 per gross square foot of the whatever you're going to build. So here's an example. Oh, well, we'll get to the example. Okay, so in LR, you're looking in LR1, let's just call it a row house, a townhouse. You see a lot of people doing that on these smaller lots. You can go to, I think this is height. Yeah, you can go 32 feet. If you're in LR2, you can go to 40. I wouldn't suggest it if you're doing a townhouse. It becomes like 4-story product. I mean, that's a tough one to sell. But anyways, that's how you figure out the height. These slides will be available if you guys want them later on down the road, but like they're all clickable links here. But this kind of tells you, this is the code, right? 23.40.45, That's what tells you what the height can be in LR1 if you're doing a townhouse or a row house. In LR1, you can do 1.1 floor area ratio. So basically take the lot here, 5,400 feet, LR1M, we're using the same example. There it is again. And it says that for single family dwelling units in LR1, all residential lots in LR1 zones, you can have one principal dwelling unit per 1,150 square feet of lot area. So the lot area was 5,400 feet. So you say, okay, you got 5,400 feet times 1.1. That gets you 5,940 square feet of FAR. Or you can take the calculation of 5,400 divided by, that square foot, 1,150. It gives you 4.69 units. So you get 4 whole units. And in some cases, if you look at the code a little bit deeper, if you're over 0.5, you can roll to another unit. So you get 5. You get 5 total units. Sometimes more is not better, though, just depending on what your exit plan is. So anyways, so if you get 4 units, let's just call it 4, and you get 5,940 feet, and you divide it by 4 units, you can get 4 units at 1,485 feet. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but I mean, like, if you said, I want to have 2 1,000 square foot units and you want to make 2 more larger ones, you could, but you basically have this amount of square foot to play with over 4 units. Is anyone catching up, or you guys picking up what I'm throwing down? Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, it's playing out here. So I haven't seen the that type of calculation.
They don't have it. Well, I guess they do have it now, depending on the city. We'll get to that in a second, though. The east side is more managed by Arch, which is a regional coalition of housing that works with the city to then set the fees. And Those are then different per city too. But we're going to go over that in a sec. So yeah, anyway, so if you take the 5,940 square feet that you can build across your 4 units, and you say, I've got to pay an MHA fee of $19.51, then that equals $115,889.40 that you got to pay to the city of Seattle. And if you may be asking yourself when you have to pay that fee, it's right before you issue your permits. So they're like, ooh, I got your approval over here, but pay me first. Then that's what you do. You pay, then you get your permits. So you got to factor this into your loan because you're paying interest on it, which is always great, right? Okay, so this is a little case study. We showed this, I think the last 2 or 3 times as an example, but we actually dug a little bit deeper into this because I was like, man, I don't remember talking about what I could pay for this lot before I had to pay the MHA fee. Because we looked at this for a client. We've also seen it for a while. I mean, like, if you look at this house and everything that's going on behind it, like, there's a lot going on back there. I would expect there to be some rats, maybe some dead bodies. I don't know. But so we ran the same calculation, okay? Like, whatever, I don't remember what the zoning is, but for example, like, you could take this 5-unit townhome building, you could put it on this lot, like, that would go there. And then, so if the fee that I have to pay to the city, I mean, not me, but like that the builder or whoever would do this deal would have to pay about $250,000. I think it was like 253, whatever, but $250,000. So if you're looking at all your costs to construct this project, you have to factor in the cost to build it. You got to factor in the cost to get permits, your architect, your civil engineer, your permit fees. You got to pay all of them. Everyone wants to get paid. Then you got to pay your lender, you got to pay your broker, you got to pay your title and your escrow and your excise tax and all that stuff, okay? Doesn't matter about, the city doesn't care about any of that. Regardless, you have to pay this $250,000 fee. Whether you have to pay the fee or not, it just kind of depends on how, like, what you can pay the seller. So if the seller comes to me and says, hey, I want to sell my lot for 600 grand. It was high already as it is. That's why the deal didn't go, but 600 grand, I want to sell this lot. Okay, let me see what we can do. Well, if I didn't have to pay the $250,000 MHA fee, I could have paid $550. I mean, you can close the gap at 50 grand most of the time. But because I have to pay this $250,000, and again, I got to pay for all the permits, I got to pay for the building costs, I got to pay everyone. My fee that what I could pay the lot is 300 grand. You think that guy sold that land? No, he did not sell that land. He's like, dude, I have a huge area back here where I'm storing all of my cool stuff. Why would I want to sell it for 300 grand? It's like, okay. So that deal didn't go. But like, that's, I guess, what I'm trying to say is like, this is what you have to factor in when you go back and you look at the code and you say, I want to build this and it costs this and I still have to pay for all of this. The last thing that you factor in is like what the cost, what you can pay the seller, because you still have to make a certain margin. Like, there's a lot of risk out there. So anyways, we kind of backed into the math, but that's Seattle specifically, okay? So MHA, Seattle, we're here. Arch, a regional coalition for housing, all the east side. They previously, before House Bill 1110 and 1337, this was really tough to be able to understand what your actual affordable housing fee is going to be. And the fee for Arch was more on like a multifamily lot, which where there was not many lots that were not already developed or had a higher and better use that were ripe to pick off, I guess, on the east side. Some in Kirkland, we did some of those, but they didn't really have like that code with the calculation with a fee that you could say, I'm building X amount of square feet and this is my fee. What would happen is you say, okay, I have this multifamily zone. I want to build this many of units. I'm going to submit it to the city. The city says, yes, it looks good. They go talk to Arch. Arch comes up with some calculation. They tell the city tells the builder. And then they say, well, it's a budget. And I'm like, well, what do you mean it's a budget? And they're like, well, this is what we think it's going to be. This literally happened. So this is like, and I'm like, okay. So I just put a little fluff in there. And then they come back and like we get some permits and they're like, okay, you got to pay the fee. And they're like, oh, well, the fee is this now. And I'm like, what do you mean it's this now? And they said, well, it was just a budget before. I'm like, well, don't you have to, like, it was like $50,000 less. Now you're telling me it's $50,000 more? How did you get there? Well, it was just an estimate before. What? So like what happened was city, states all passed their House Bill 1110, 1337. Then the cities had to put a little bit more transparency into what their fees are. And this was all ever evolving, right? So this was like that specific scenario was prior to the House bills passing. It was actually this code right here. It says if you're in medium density residential zones and you're developing 4 or more dwelling units, you shall provide at least 10% of the units as affordable units as defined in this chapter. So you're like, what does that mean? Basically, when you build 4, you have to pay a fee. It's just what's the fee? And then you have to ask. And then it was kind of like this horse trading thing. But City of Kirkland came out with now some more relief and said in residential zones, if you're building over 2,000 square feet, then the fee is like $20 a foot. So that helps. It's less, but it's predictable. At least I can say if I'm going to build a 4,000 square foot unit, I only pay the fee over the 2,000 square feet. And then they have some credits in there too, where like, let's say your house that you're taking down is 3,000 square feet, you can basically get a credit. So that's good too. But there was not transparency before. But regardless, that's Kirkland specifically. Redmond has come out with their own fee sheet, which is very transparent, which is very appreciative. The fees were based on what Arch had provided to them as an estimate of what they think is fair, which we've had a little bit of back and forth about. Sammamish did the same thing. Bellevue did something completely different. So did Kenmore, Bothell, Woodinville, like all of them did something completely different. So what I'm trying to say is like knowing where to look and how to calculate the fee and then associate that into your cost is what I'm trying to get across to you guys. This was Kirkland. That was prior to the fee. Trees. Man, trees. What should I say about trees? This is Kirkland's table for how you need to look at your trees. So anyways, get an arborist first and foremost, a good one that understands the cities and what their requirements are. We can all read the code, but at the end of the day, if you have an excellent tree and it's viable, like they want you to keep it. You have different categories of trees. You got heritage trees, and the way I kind of think about it is kind of funny. If you put your arms around it and your fingers can touch, probably can't take it down. That's not a real use it measurement tool. Don't do that. But an example. Anyways, this is basically saying if you got a healthy tree and it's in excellent condition, you're going to have to keep it. These are all viable to keep. And so how does that correlate to your project that you're building? It just depends on where the trees are located. This talks a little bit more about the crown, the inner root zone, how you excavate around those roots. This is an example. I thought this was a pretty good example. This is a project that we're building up in Finn Hill right now. And I thought this was a good example because it shows you how you're working around the trees. You can see this is not what I would have envisioned if we were to scrape the whole lot and put the units the way I wanted them, how I would want to do it. But you can see that this tree fencing has to be here to protect these trees. And all these little rings right here are clusters of trees, which they call a grove. A grove is a cluster of trees, basically. And when they're clustered together, they want to try and keep them together as much as possible. But you can see, like, for example, that you have these rings. These are your crown, which is like you think about the branches and everything that's like hanging out. And then you got your inner root zone. So the smaller one is your inner root zone. So those are the roots in the base of the tree. And then you get your crown. And this unit right here, you can see we're probably going to have to do what's called air spading around because you're kind of under the crown and you're in the inner root zone. And if you were just to say, screw it, I'm not going to put this foundation in. I need 2 more feet behind it to be able to put in all my forms. I need to work in here for all the footing drains and stuff. Like, screw these trees. Like, you're going to get in a lot of trouble, so don't do that. But you can see how you have to work around and how that affects your site plan. And if you think about, like, what's your exit strategy? Is it for sale or is it for rent? It's different, right? Like, this maybe doesn't make as much sense Like it probably doesn't matter as much if you're renting them, if this was pushed forward even more. But if you're selling them, like there's 2 parking spots here. That's kind of a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal for rents too, but you know, it really is a big deal when you're trying to sell them. So you got parking spot here, you got 1 here, 2 here, 2 here. So everyone's got 2 parking spots, and that's good. But it's just tough when you're looking at the whole meat and potatoes, and you look at, it's kind of like a cake, right? You start with the base, and you got layer after layer after layer after layer after layer, and you're trying to make this beautiful cake. You're a cake baker, but you're building houses, and there's just a lot going on. Lot segregation. Okay, so this is what was not allowed previously, depending on where you're at. So like Renton particularly. I remember early on, people were like, hey, I got a property in Renton. Can I do something? And I was like, yeah, sure. And the ADU code they came out with said that you can't segregate or subdivide those units from the principal dwelling, which means that you could technically have a house and you could have an ADU in the back, but you couldn't segregate it in ownership from the principal dwelling unit. And then they were like, man, we're not really seeing a lot of ADUs get built. I wonder why. And I'm like, because you don't let them get sold, you dummy. Because like, if you look at like the cost and what those things are gonna rent for, I mean, the cost to build to rent in this area doesn't really work out that well. This would be like a life event. Your mom needs to live in the backyard. She's got healthcare needs. Your kids are from college. They want to live in close by. They're having kids. Maybe they take the house. The parents move into the ADU, whatever. I think they only saw like 40 or something like that at the time, like over the 10-year span. Anyways, it's just really low. So one of the things to look out for is to make sure that you can segregate it in ownership. And then this tells you like how big your square footage is allowed to be for ADU specifically. We've had this happen probably a couple times a week since the code has changed, where if you're in Snohomish County, and if you don't know what UGA is, you're in the urban growth area. You're either in it or out of it, or you're in the city or you're out of the city. It's complicated, but there's a map, and it shows you a line of if you're in the city. This is what's weird. You have a city, okay, I live in Snohomish. But are you in the city of Snohomish, or are you out of the city of Snohomish? And if you're out of the city of Snohomish, are you in the rural area or are you in the UGA? If I was to ask any of you right now, you probably go cross-eyed. So that determines what you can and can't do. If you're in the city of Snohomish, you can build like 3 units. If you're outside of the city of Snohomish, you're not going to submit to the city. You're going to submit to the county. If you're in the UGA, you can do up to 4 units there. But if you got a Snohomish address and you're outside of the UGA, then you can only do 1 dadu, but only if your lot is, oh, sorry, I'll get back to that. Only if your lot is 5 acres or more. So it says detached accessory dwelling units are prohibited on lots in R5 zones that are less than 5 acres in size. One of my buddies actually reached out to me. He has a Snohomish address, and he's not in the UGA. This is a perfect example. He says, I want to build a unit. I want to build a dadu in my backyard for my mother-in-law. They have to move in. We got kids. Perfect kind of deal. And he asked me if I could help him out. And I'm like, dude, you're not in the UGA. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, why can't I do it? I thought they passed the code. I asked ChatGPT, and they said I could. I was like, dude, ChatGPT only knows so much. He's like, what? So anyways, he was like, well, I want to build a shop and I want to build a dadu. And I was like, okay. So technically in R5, that's what his zone is. If you don't know the difference, right? If you're in the city, R5 would mean you could put 5 dwelling units per acre. When you're outside of the city, outside of the UGA, it means you can put 1 dwelling unit for every 5 acres. It's very different, but people get it confused. Anyways, he wanted to build a shop. So I said, you could build a garage or a private accessory shop up to 2,400 feet, which is permitted in the R5 zone. What was not allowed, because we just kind of looked at this, you cannot build a dadu because he has a lot that's like 2.5 acres, not 5. And he's zoned R5. So he couldn't build a dadu. And he's like, damn it. I knew it wasn't going to work. And I'm like, well, hold on. It says that you can build a guest house. What about that? He goes, well, what's a guest house? I'm I was like, I don't know, let's look. So it means that you can build a structure that is not more than 2 bedrooms, having no kitchen, and which shall be used or designed for primarily by guests or servants. Wow, they should probably change that. We don't have servants anymore. Servants, those are your children, actually, for sleeping quarters only. So I was like, well, you should go down to the county and ask them what the definition of a guest house is. Because if like a daddy can be 1,200 square feet and your garage is exempt, how is that any different than a guest house? He's like, I don't know. So he went down and asked. And they're like, oh yeah, we don't have any limits on our guest house. You can build them as big as you want. As long as you're within, I think it was like, I didn't show it, but like between your detached private accessory, your existing house, and your guest house, I think you couldn't have any more than like 8,000 square feet or something like that, like plenty of room. But anyways, he was like, oh, okay, cool. So I'm going to submit as a guest house. I was like, yeah, but if you submit it as a daddy, you get rejected. He's like, what's the difference? And I was like, you're just calling it a guest house. That's the only difference. Well, I guess the only other difference is that you can segregate and subdivide and sell separately a dadu, but because he's not 5 acres, he can't. So I guess if you're thinking about it that way, but anyways. Yeah, so we've got a lot of people that reach out all the time that like buy a piece of property without doing their research. Maybe they talk to an architect and they drop like a nice site plan, but they don't look at the public works. They don't look at like all of the different stuff. They don't run a financial model. They don't look at the exit strategy. No offense to any architects around here. You're educated, you're different. But you know, everyone wants to get paid for their service, but they have their kind of blinders on. They're only looking at like the one piece of the pie or that one layer of the cake. And so doing your research, don't just go talk to the city and just go buy a lot or think you can do something and then submit and then get upset because you don't get the result you're looking for. You need to like bring the whole piece together. Katie is so nice the way she put this. While DIY efforts are admirable, make sure you hire a professional. Building codes laws, they change all the time. So there's actually, I think, a House bill that came out, or I don't know if it was passed, there's like so many of them, that says that they have to slow down how quickly they change their codes. Because if you're changing your codes all the time, it's just more stuff for the cities to keep up to date with, for planners to have to review, for architects to have to keep up with, for rejections in your applications. It's like constant. So they're like, whoa, let's pump the brakes. But always know where to look, right? So the process and the goal I'm trying to get across is like, know where to look, always go to the code. Don't save it on your desktop somewhere for 3 years and then think that's what it's going to be because it may be different. Understand the review process. Oh, yeah. Okay, so while other considerations, so easements. This is something that comes on your title report or maybe on your quarter section map. If you don't know what a quarter section map is, these are things that are recorded like on the county maps, usually, that you can find. And I provided an example here, which I thought was a really good one. So some people get really excited about pieces of property that have a lot of lot area, but not knowing that it's an easement that benefits somebody else and you can't actually do anything with it. And so I've had this one come across my desk multiple times. If you guys have seen it in Kirkwood, you know which one it is. But I'm not really a big fan of the keep plus deal unless you're keeping it and you're moving your parents in there or your servants or something like that. But if you can't tell, this is Seattle City Light and this is high voltage power lines. This is Kirkland's, but it's Seattle City Light's power tower. And so they have, I believe it's like 150 feet from the center line each way that they require for maintenance and access. And you're like, why is Seattle City Light Kirkland? Well, because they have power that runs all the way through the city and that's their power lines. But I've had multiple times a broker or a builder or somebody sent me this. And they're like, hey, dude, like you got this house right here. You put 2 dadus right here. You put 1 house right here, blah, blah, blah. Like, let's do it. I'm like, you can't do it. Because if you look at the quarter section map, you can see right here, it's probably tough to see, but this dashed little line right here, and this dashed little line right here, I guess this is the other half. I think Katie added it. That says it's a City of Seattle transmission line easement. I think this is actually shown up there, but we wanted to show you what it was called. So if you go back and you look, like there's no structures within that amount of feet. on either side. These ones might be a little bit closer, but there is definitely an area where you can't build a structure. You can have driveways, you can have walking paths, but you cannot have any structure. No buildings, no houses. So can't do anything there. Highest and best use, make it a flag football field or something. Yeah, so we're getting towards the end. Liberty Investments, I guess, what is it? What do we do? We've been developing property for quite a while. We've been getting a lot of questions from a lot of different people. They have property, they want to buy property, they don't understand what they can do with their property. So we're basically helping you redevelop your property through the same service that we provide to ourselves, right? We're going to run the feasibility, the permitting coordination. We're going to work with the designer, build it, sell it, monetize on it. You guys keep 100% of the profit. It's your deal. I don't want to do a JV. And so that's the service that we're providing. We're still acquiring property ourselves, but if you're going to do it, make sure you're hiring someone that knows what they're doing. Most of the time, a builder only does the building. They're going to ask you to let them know when you get permits. They're not going to run all the way through for you. And so we're just helping people now unlock the newfound potential that wasn't previously allowed, and making sure that you have, someone by your side that knows what they're doing. The pre-feasibility that we provide, I think we have some handouts on it. A lot of brokers now have a little bit misunderstanding of what you can do on a piece of property, how that makes it more valuable or not. I've seen people put property up for sale for some ungodly price. It doesn't make any sense to me, but it's because they think that the zoning says you can add 5 units and that makes it more valuable, but really it's not because they don't know the math. So a couple different things. If you have a piece of property and you don't know what you can do, the pre-feasibility is just a quick high-level look. This is what you can do. This is what it's going to cost. This is the highest and best use from our opinion. You can look at it from different options. Or if you're like a broker and you've got a listing coming up and you want to have a really good valuation of what it may be worth to a builder, this pre-feasibility could be used for that as well. It's less than the cost of a home inspection. It gets turned out in a couple of days. We'll provide a lot of information to you. If you guys decide you have a client or yourself that you want to move forward into, full development services, which we provide, then that is kind of like your first step. The fee is credited towards your full project cost. So I think it's a pretty good deal. It provides peace of mind. It's much more than any city or anyone else is going to do for you. These are all the different steps that we kind of look over. You have a piece of property, you want to look at it, you got questions or whatever, you can scan the QR code. They're on your desk. They're here. If you want the slide deck, Katie can get it to you. Or you can just email us or whatever. We'll get it to you. Yeah, that's it. I don't know how my time is, but that's it. Any questions?
1975.
Do you have what comes to my mind, people in the renewables, is it a service that you provide is all in what you do, or is there any consideration to, lightly consult so that you obviously get some return on your time, but someone's not saying I want to do everything from end to end with you? Or they just do an end-to-end service full and no problem.
That's why we do the pre-feasibility, because if you've got a piece of property or somebody's got a piece of property, a client has something, and you want to know what our quick look is, we can do it pretty quickly. I don't know what other kind of consulting you would need other than that, because we're going to tell you if it makes sense or it doesn't, or I would do this or I wouldn't do that. And if you decide you want to try and move forward on your own, I kind of don't really want to be involved, because it's just the time and the dollars isn't really worth it, and then you're going to try and figure it out, and then you're going to come back to me anyways, or you're going to go to somebody else, or it's going to take a lot longer. And I don't have time to be involved in that. So that's why we're okay, we'll do the pre-feasibility. This is what I would do. This is highest and best use. This is the cost. This is what I think is better. And if you want to move forward, great. If you don't, totally fine. But I kind of want to keep it. That's our line.
Run into anything where on the base of the flat map or in the CCNRs have a requirement that was established that said that these lots.
Yes, all the time. That's one of the first things we look at. Yeah, on the quarter section map, sometimes you can see where the plot is based on how it's highlighted. And we're actually, because that is a big one, like City of Bellevue did a study and they said that I believe 80% of their lots are covered in CC&Rs. And if you go ask the city if you could do something on your lot, they're going to tell you yes, because per the zoning code, technically you can, but they're not going to look at your title report or your private covenants that may affect what you can do on your property. And some people are just moving forward with something, not knowing that it's going to be a risk. But to your point, we're going to be looking at that in month 10. I guess it's probably too far out, but risks and liability and development, protecting yourself and, you know, all of that. That's going to be CC&R is definitely a big one.
Comment on that, and you have to be careful with the height of units, size of units, number of units. There's a bunch of CC&R.
Lot sizes.
Always, sometimes they're in the title report, sometimes you have to actually base of the plat.
Yep.
Stuff to be written in there 100 years ago.
Mhm.
We see a lot of people make that mistake.
Yeah, for sure. And then the ripple effects of that that you're not going to see right now is that, let's just say you or somebody you know bought a house in a neighborhood and they are not happy about the new zoning code changes, and a neighbor down the street is now changing the character or the quiet enjoyment of that neighborhood because they put in a 3-story something and they don't like it. And they then look at their title report and see that, you know, you're not allowed to segregate, subdivide, create more lots, build more units, and everything has been conforming in that neighborhood. And that's the reason why they bought there. And then you're out there building a 4-unit building, and then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, what's going on? And then their attorney then sends you a letter and says, hey, you didn't follow the CC&Rs. Then you got a lawsuit on your hand. Those are the things that you're not really going to see until a period of time, because the people who didn't look are going to find out the hard way. Some people may get lucky, but then there's a statute of limitations to where that property has to be in effect without disputes for a period of time to then be grandfathered in, to then you can say, look at that whole neighborhood and wherever that plat is and say, okay, well, this has been a non-conforming use for up to 7 years or whatever. And so therefore it's kind of that period to where then nobody's creating disputes, and now you can go do something because it's now you're breaking the CC&Rs and nobody's disputed it. But it takes a long time. It's a lot of risk. And you could be sleeping at night and then all of a sudden 4 years later get a call from somebody and just not know it.
This time we should set up a call.
We break CC&Rs all the time on stuff like 2-car garage for 1.5 stories. Somebody else has taken the chance and nobody challenged it, we'll go for it.
Yeah.
You just don't want to be the first guy in the pool.
Yeah. And I would say those are a little bit lower risk. It lives and feels like a single family.
ACCs are also
Yes.
showable on CC&Rs.
Lines on the bottom, we just stuff the
Yeah.
top.
All right. Does anyone on the Zoom have any questions, you know, Ben? No, we're good? Okay,
Oh no.
cool. I don't know why this isn't working. Okay, well, thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. That was awesome.